All right, hello again. In the last video, we looked at how to catch exceptions that some other code throws. This video, we're going to look at throwing your own exceptions. And this is really the solution to how to report errors from an object. Up until now, we've been doing like a system out print line or maybe a system.err print line to log the error, but that's not really the right way to do it. It's a much better solution to have your code throw an exception and then let the person who's using your code decide whether they want to catch it, and if so, what they want to do with it, or whether they just want to let the program halt. This is what we're looking at on the screen here, throwing an exception. I'm just going to show you a piece of code that's in the sample code for this week. It's the circle class. We also have the geometric object class here. We've seen this code before. So circle extends geometric object, and you can create circle objects. But what I wanted to show you here was the get and set radius methods. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new Java class called test circle, and I'm just going to create a circle object. C equals new circle, like this. And then we will just do c.setRadius. Well, I'll tell you what, let's use a scanner here. New scanner, system.in. And then we can go system.println, radius. And then we'll do this really compactly. We'll go c.setRadius. So we got a value from the user. And we're just going to use it to call the setRadius method. We'll go sc.nextInt. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to collect an integer from the user, which, as we know, might throw an exception, but I'm not catching it here. Whatever the user types, assuming this line doesn't throw an exception, it's going to pass it to setRadius. And over in circle, if it's less than or equal to 0, it's going to give me an error message on the screen. So let's just make sure that it works. Here we go. Whoops, wrong. That's from the last video. So radius, I say 34. It ends. It does call set radius and then it ends. If I say -4, error, radius must be greater than 0, not changed. I guess we could do this system.out.println c.getRadius. So we'll view the radius at the end. So this is all well and good if what we're doing is a console app, but most apps aren't like that. Most apps are graphical. Also, it doesn't tell, if I'm writing this code and I'm using the circle object that somebody else gave me to use, it doesn't tell my code that an error happened. It tells the user on the screen if they're looking at this log, which they probably aren't going to be. So it's not very useful. It doesn't let me know that something went wrong with the code that I was using. It doesn't let me as the application programmer know. So here's a better way to do it. If radius is less than 0, what we want to do here is throw an exception. Now there's different kinds of exceptions which we looked at last time. The one that we'll probably use most commonly will be the illegal argument exception. So you could say illegal argument exception, and it's part of java.lang, so you don't have to import it. E equals new illegal argument exception, like that. That's the easiest way to do it. And then we can just throw it. Throw E. And now this is unreachable. So we have to comment it out. The reason it's unreachable is because this is like a return statement. So now we have two ways to end a method. One way to end the method would be with the return statement, which will stop executing and return to where it got called from right away. Another is the throw method. Throw is a lot like return. It stops execution right here. If there are any more lines, they will not get executed. But rather than returning a value, it throws an exception back to where we called this method. So it's going to throw an exception back to here, and I can either catch or allow it to be thrown. So right now, if I run this now, and the user enters 45, that's going to be fine. But if I enter a negative value, see, it threw an exception, illegal argument exception. It came from test circle, line 10. We had called setRadius, and it threw this exception, illegal argument exception. Now, if we want to, we can add a little message to the exception. We can say circle.setRadius, bad radius value, I don't know, something like that. Now when we run it, so again, we're calling a constructor here to create an illegal argument exception object. There's the constructor is overloaded, as it is for all exceptions, I believe. You can leave this blank, so you're not passing anything, or you can pass a string message. So if I say -45 now, it says the same thing, except there's the message that I set into the exception. What it's actually doing here is it's calling a method called print stack trace of that exception, which includes the message that I sent. We can also, we're doing this in 2 lines. We could do it in 1 line. This e variable here, we can sort of cut out the middleman of the e variable and just go throw new illegal argument exception. Since we're creating it just to throw it, we don't have to store it in a variable name. So this will work too. We're throwing the illegal argument exception. And then over here in test circle, what we probably want to do is catch this. So we can go try catch illegal argument exception e, and we can say system out print line, oops, and then we can go e.getMessage, which will be the message that I gave the exception when I created it. So now when I run it, instead of getting a stack trace like this, a big ugly red block of text, we're going to get a more graceful oops, and then this is the message that came back with the exception. So this line threw an exception. That means this line didn't get executed. It paused here and went straight over to the catch block, found the one that matched, and then printed out the exception. So that's the right way when you're creating a class that's going to be used to create an object. This is, in the vast majority of cases, this is the right way to tell the world that something went wrong. You throw an exception, and then it's on the application programmer, which might be you or might be somebody else, to decide, am I going to catch this exception, or am I just going to let the program die at this point? And that's their choice. You can also, we don't have to do it for this course, but you can also create your own exception objects, exception classes. So if you take a look at the hierarchy from the previous guide here, if you want to create a runtime exception, which would be a non-checked one, you can just create a new class, call it, Sam's exception or my exception or bad value exception, extends runtime exception, and you'll have to add a constructor to it, and that's it. And then you have, that's kind of a nice thing to do because you can give it a more specific name. When this one gets thrown, it just says illegal argument exception. I could create a class called bad radius exception and throw that, and then they could catch that. So it makes it a little bit more clear what's going on. Anyways, that's a bit beyond the scope of what we're doing, but it's certainly well within what you guys could understand. You can create this new exception class, include it in your project, and then throw that exception. Okay. I think that's all we really need to do. If we had a constructor, we might want to throw an exception from the constructor as well. So set methods and constructors are the obvious places where you're gonna do that. I think that's it for the content here. So what I would like you to do, I'm hoping that you went and did assignment 1A and got read-only exception, throwing exceptions. What I would like you to do now in part A here is go back to it. Go to your main method that you called and catch the exception. Sorry, not catch the exception. So yeah, this method was already throwing an array index out of bounds exception. What I want you guys to do is go back and don't allow it to throw an array index out of bounds exception. I want you to throw an illegal argument exception instead with a user-friendly error message that includes the bad value, something like this, bad value index -1. Okay, so there's 2 ways to do this. One is you can use an if statement at the beginning of the get method to check the index and then throw an exception if it's a bad index, and that'll stop the method. Another way you can do it is you just let the get method do what it does, and if it throws an array index out of bounds exception, you catch it, but then in the catch block you throw a new exception, the one that you want to throw, the illegal argument exception. So that's another way to do it. I'd like you to try it both ways. So try writing it with an if statement, and then try writing it so that you throw an illegal argument exception from the catch block of a try-catch method that's catching the array index out of bounds exception. And then maybe in class we'll talk about which way you liked better. Okay, so that's it for this video. Next video is going to be on, I think we're doing array lists next. Yeah, we're going to do array lists, and then we're going to look at mouse events. All right, see you in the next video.